Hi, welcome to another session on our Somatic Healing Summit from Heart Mind Institute. My name is Dr. Phillip Maull, your co-host for this session, and I'm really thrilled to be here today with Dr. Phillip Shepherd. Welcome, Phillip.
It's such a pleasure to be here, Phillip. Thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you and to do this interview. So I'm going to share your bio to familiarize the audience with you, and then we'll jump right in. Sound good?
That sounds great.
Okay. So Phillip Shepherd is a leader in the global embodiment movement and founder of the Embodied Present Process, TEPP, offering a series of over 250 practices to help people ground themselves in the body's wisdom. The philosophy and practical applications of TEPP help people recognize how well-being is undermined by living in the head, a state of disembodiment our culture takes for granted. TEPP helps people recover the intimacy of true presence, in which they soften into deeper intelligence of the body, find themselves rekindled with purpose, and discover a new kind of freedom and possibility in their lives. These practices are shared via online courses, international workshops, retreats, and facilitator training. Phillip is the author of New Self, New World, and Radical Wholeness, and co-author of Deep Fitness, which explores strength training as a meditative embodiment practice. His work has been featured in numerous media outlets and podcasts worldwide. 250 practices. I remember when I read that when I was preparing for that. But that's a lot of practices you've developed there.
But yeah, it's been a wonderful discipline for me because we run facilitators trainings, and they're year-long trainings. We've done 10 of them, and every week I share a practice with someone. And it turns out there are so many ways in which we've been shut down or desensitized by our culture that I can target those, and I never run out.
That's great. Towards the end of our interview, I'd like to invite you to lead some kind of practice for us, whatever one.
I love that.
Yeah. Maybe we could start with something about you, the origins of your work. I'm curious if there was a time when you maybe felt profoundly disembodied in your life, or a time when you really had a profound experience of reconnecting with the body, and how that then influenced the future of your work.
Yeah, it's funny because I have felt disembodied, but every time like in my youth, I felt disembodied. It was like this war between the body saying, this isn't enough, and the head saying, I know everything, and just leave it to me. And all my life, I've been an actor, and I've had amazing embodied experiences running or riding my bike. But what comes to mind is a practice I did as an actor that it's a peculiar practice developed by a guy who was one of the pioneers of physical theater in Europe. And it's just, you just stand still until you need to move. And then you let the body move as it needs to. So it's undoing the top-down control of the body that the head wants to assert, and just letting the body be free to move as it wishes. And there was one time I did that and just broke through something that has stayed with me since.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's wonderful when those liberating moments and transpersonal moments or moments of deep embodiment actually become abiding and stay with us.
Yeah.
Sometimes they seem so ephemeral. They seem so profound in the moment. And then a couple of days later, we're back to the thing. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So our focus today is on movement practice, embodied movement practices, a big part of your work, obviously. And I think they're somewhat underutilized yet in healing. And I wonder, what role do you feel conscious movement plays in embodied approaches to healing, somatic healing?
Yeah, to me, the word healing, I always remember it comes from a Latin word that means wholeness. So healing moves us towards wholeness. And in terms of the body, you can feel the body like a machine, which keeps it out of wholeness, or you can recognize it as a field of energy that is in continuous exchange with the world around us. And when the body is a machine, we're using it like a tool, and it is broken into parts, and it's driven by the head. It's like the head takes charge. And that's, Fleet, that is an ancient inclination. Plato, so 350 BC, in a dialogue called Timaeus, describes the head as the divinest part of us. And the body as the vehicle the head was given to get things done. It's deeply encoded in our neurology. And to come out of that and to begin to feel the body as energy, as intelligence, is something that movement is absolutely essential for. And I think there are two sort of ways in which movement facilitate a return to wholeness. And one is just through integration. We park energies in the body. There are events that would overwhelm us if we allowed them to be truly felt. And so we park them in the body. And to me, they're like orphans. They've been left alone. And how to integrate them? How do you bring an orphan into your family? You don't push it. You don't judge it. You accept that orphan unconditionally and bring it in with love. And to me, it's the same with those stuck energies in the body. And what is unintegrated will resist integration until it's been allowed its full expression. So expression has been prohibited, which is part of the holding of the energy in the body. And movement, if you allow the body to move, what has been prohibited can find expression. And that movement can be like the exercise I described. It can be dance, it can be running, it can be happen in so many different ways. And it can also, the expression can also happen writing or singing or standing in the woods screaming, but that the necessity of permitting the expression is something that requires movement of some sort. The other side of movement is awareness. We deaden ourselves to the body as we treat it as a thing. And for me, to come down to a very slow sensitivity to the body unlocks the body into its natural flow. And we're so used to sitting in the head, making the body do the right thing for its own good, and to step back from that. And even with your head, just slowly move it to one side, you can sometimes feel there's a little jitteriness in the movement. And that's made possible by that very subtle level of awareness that brings you into contact with the ways in which the body is being compartmentalized, the ways in which it's being held under control by what the head wants from it. So to bring that sort of awareness to the body, where it leads eventually is to a sense of a body that is always in motion. There's no part of it that's ever locked up. And when that happens, the body's intelligence is able to feel and attune to the present. When we lock up the body, for me, any tension that is held in the body is a form of resistance to the present. So to find your way back into that state where it's almost there's an inner ocean in the body, which is the reality. We're 65, 70% water, and it's the fluidity of the body that facilitates the health-giving exchanges that go on within it. So to surrender the body to its fluidity is something that for me is greatly facilitated by that very slow quality of movement.
Yeah, you were sharing, our first day on the summit, as everyone knows now, was focused on trauma. And what you're describing is these orphans that get parked in the body is a pretty good description of how people talk about the stuck patterns of dysregulation that trauma represent, and that the process of healing is always coming to the body. We have to come back into the body to heal and metabolize and integrate. I think in your bio, it referenced how culturally disembodied we are. And then you just referenced Plato. I didn't realize it started all the way back with Plato. I wasn't aware of that quote. Seems like the Cartesian split began way back then. Yeah. But yeah, I have a friend that says in Western culture, our bodies have been relegated to the role of being just a brain taxi, just something to carry around this supercomputer that sits on our shoulders. much to our own detriment. But in alignment for a moment around this issue of healing, and in particular healing trauma or reintegrating these orphans that you spoke of, for many people, because the body is almost foreign territory, right? Very little relationship with it. And often it's just a source of pain and suffering, even physically. But then if there is trauma, or especially significant traumas there, that's stored in the body. So in some ways, the body is the last place the person wants to go, right?
Yeah.
And so how can people begin the process of reconnecting with their body in a way that's workable for them? And so maybe gradually titrate their experience so they gradually reclaim the body, because to me, this is the hero's journey. It seems like it's the human condition that we all end up in a disembodied state to one degree or another. I don't think indigenous peoples, at least in indigenous cultures, that still live in their ways. And there's very few that live in that protected of surroundings, perhaps some in Africa, some in South America, but are naturally more embodied. And they live in a world where they don't have the protection of all the artificial environments. So they really need to be plugged into the environment and plugged into their bodies to even to survive. But for moderns, I think we're part of the human condition that we find ourselves relatively disembodied to one degree or another as we move into adulthood. And then it's that process of coming home. And so if there is a lot of suffering there, and if coming back to the body increases someone's anxiety or fear, how do you work with that?
I believe that the only true security we have is the security of our being. Mm-hmm. That sense that I've been injured and sick, but still there is that security of being. And what we defer to instead of that is the idea of safety. And it's important to look both ways before you cross the street, but essentially, life isn't safe. You're going to get sick, you're going to get injured, you're going to feel grief and loss, and you're going to die. And what happens is we internalize that and deduce, maybe if I'm less alive, I'll be more safe. And our whole culture, like our very neurology, is shaped by a value system that says up is good and down is bad. You're looking up today, and there's no ambiguity in what that means. But to understand in another culture, you're looking up today could mean you're looking a little flighty and ungrounded. Are you okay? Just as you're looking down could mean you're looking at peace with yourself and at rest on the earth. How wonderful. But we have deeply ingrained this message. And to me, it harks back to the Neolithic Revolution, where our center of thinking, our center of awareness was in the belly. And as the Neolithic Revolution unfolded and we began to rely increasingly on taking control of our environment for our survival, when we'd always relied on harmonizing with our environment, that control relies on a certain abstraction. And you can see in the evolution of language, in the evolution of art, how that center of awareness rose over centuries until it was in the head. It's not often that understood, but to me, I feel these two poles of intelligence, of consciousness within the body, and one is in the belly and one is in the head. And that journey back to security, that journey back to the body, to me, it needs to be incremental. It needs to be baby steps, that if you can surrender a little to what the body is feeling, you acquire a little more security. You're a little more connected to the present. And that extra bit of security gives you another possibility of surrendering to what the body's feeling. And bit by bit, you come back. In the simplest of terms for me, that journey back to the body is a journey out of aloneness into companionship. And our culture deeply teaches us that we are alone. And that is the head's perspective. The head The strength of the head's intelligence is that it can step back from the world and gain perspective on it and analyze things. The head's intelligence doesn't realize there's such a thing as wholeness. What it sees is the parts, and it has a facility for manipulating those parts and organizing them into models that represent reality. And the body's intelligence attunes to the present. It feels everything in the world as participant in that wholeness of the present and as a manifestation of it. And the body deeply recognizes that it belongs. You can stand before a tree and say, oh, that's a tree, which is the head's assessment, or you can feel its life. And that happens through the body. And as you feel the life of that tree, there is a sense of its being that it begets a mutual recognition between you of companionship, of kinship. Here we are, these two beings sharing this moment. And trauma makes us feel alone. When we're depressed, we're alone. When we're anxious, we're alone. And to me, aloneness is a fantasy peddled by our culture. The sensitivity with which you are felt by the world around you is unimaginable. And there is no aloneness. You are birthed of the earth. You are made of the earth. The world is continuously turning into you as you're turning the world, turning yourself back into the world. You eat an apple and you chew and you swallow, and its flesh and its juice become your flesh and blood. You take a breath into the body and exhalations of force become part of you. And then you breathe out a gift of carbon dioxide in exchange. So the participation in this world that upholds us in every moment is undiminishable. And yet we feel alone. And that's a result of having abided in this cultural value system that says up is good and down is bad, which goes back to this journey through the Neolithic and has led us to place hell beneath our feet and heaven above us. And what happens is when we're stressed, we've so deeply internalized that message that our energy climbs higher and higher, scrambling to the head in the belief that it will save us. And it's a disabling strategy because you're coming more and more deeply into aloneness and abstraction and increasingly out of relationship. And I don't think there is such a thing as self-regulation. I think we are regulated by relationship. And there are ways in which you can affect a surrender to relationship, but I can't. If I'm trying to regulate myself, I'm already in a divided state. I'm already out of wholeness. Whereas if I come into relationship with the world around me, I am regulated by the present. And every time I return to it, I feel that potency of being summoned into coherence.
There's a lot to follow up on there. I want to come back to that self-regulation issue in a moment. We'll come back to that. But first of all, I just love how you're communicating and what you're sharing with us, because it's just at the very heart of our human journey and what I think of as the hero's journey. Even going back, the creation story in the Judeo-Christian Bible, the fall and the departure from the Garden of Eden is very much the story, preferencing knowledge, preferencing the intellect over the body, over earth, right, over being. And I think you're right. It's all, not only do we fairly disembodied, we create this artificial psychological self, this me thing, and it's up here somewhere. We can even put it out there and then have conversations with ourselves and look back at ourselves and criticize ourselves. And it's all this completely psychological, unreal kind of unrelational thing. And from that place, we can't really relate with the world. But because we don't have a home here, and we really need a home as human beings, we're out looking to create a home everywhere. And this has created this whole vicious cycle or non-virtuous cycle which creates all the suffering in the world. We get out of relationship with ourselves, out of relationship with each other, out of relationship with the earth, and thus all the suffering and all the destruction we see. And now it's exacerbated with not only modernity, but now into the digital age with all the social media, and all of this is just an effort to we're all trying to find our home in a screen somewhere or something like that. And it's somehow we have to create a pattern interrupt and turn that around. And what I hear you saying is and I very much have this understanding that we already have all we need to find our way home. We already have even the neurological wiring to come home. And if we can drop into presence and relationality, whether it's with the earth or nature, with ourselves, with others, that we can be guided back. If we're open, we can find our way back home. The path is there, and we can find our way back home and into relationship with this body, with each other, with the earth. It really just describes the whole flow of life and the whole flow that's got us in some things that are not so great on the earth and in our culture, but it also is that same flow, the return journey, right? And you're describing that so beautifully.
And that quality of moving into the head takes you out of relationship with the present. And we all need guidance, but now you've lost your connection to the primary guidance of your life. And all you can do is guide yourself. All you can do is assert ideas and try to mold them into some path of success. And I think the primary wound that we all carry within us is in the sundering of our thinking from our being. So we have been trained, and the school system does that, to believe that thinking happens in the head, and then there's the body that feels. And this separation of thinking and being means that we have lost the ability to think with the whole of our being. And it's through the being that your thinking is guided. You speak of guidance, it's guided by the world. And when thinking and being come together again, and they used to be together. If you look up the English word sense, it comes from a Latin word sentire. Sentire meant to think, to feel, was one thing. And those two meanings are still preserved in English. So you can say, you're not making sense, in which case you're saying your thinking is muddled. Or you can say, I sense something's wrong, in which case you're saying, I feel something's wrong. But to recognize every thought can be felt through the body. And if it is, the body's intelligence is like an echo chamber that refines and clarifies that thought. And similarly, every sensation in the body can be recognized as a form of thinking. If thought is essentially the processing of a relationship, which you can do abstractly between the numbers 1 and 2, and you multiply them and it's 2, and you subtract 1 from 2 and it's 1, etc. But the body is processing millions of relationships in every second. And that thinking of the body is dismissed as the noise of the mechanics. And it's not the body. What the body most deeply feels is the present. And to recognize sensation in the body as thinking and to feel your thoughts through the whole of your being is to come back into that wholeness that carries you out of your aloneness.
In the past several decades, the work of Joseph Chilton Pearce and others, but in the past decade, in particular with heart math's work, a lot of us now are talking about there's a lot around the biome in relation to your health. But the fact that the biome, the gut, has a neural network, the fact that the heart has a neural network. And so sometimes we talk now, instead of one brain, the skull encapsulated brain, we talk about 3, which at least is beginning to bring it back into some sense of somatic intelligence, that when it's not all just happening up here, that it's a whole process. We understand that idea of what you get a gut feeling is not just a metaphor, right? That the neural networks, there's more information going up to the brain than coming down, right? And we're beginning to connect, I think, with this. And you talk a lot about reconnecting with the body's intelligence. And I wonder if you could talk about that kind of inherent intelligence and wisdom that is there in the body available to us.
Yeah. So let me bring a historic context to it. The brain in our evolutionary path appeared about 521 million years ago. Prior to that, there was no brain. So for more than 3 billion years, we were thinking without a brain. And we survived ice ages and cataclysms as unicellular, multicellular organisms that could feel their environment and respond to it and find nourishment and avoid toxins. And the intelligence that does not rely on a brain is our foundational intelligence. They did this fabulous experiment with slime molds. And a slime mold, it's just a collection of amoeba. It's not an organism. There's no brain. They had a petri dish, and there was a base of gelatin in it. And they put 3 glass discs to one side of the petri dish. And on the other side, they put 1 glass disc, and they placed a slime mold in the middle. And for about 14 hours, it was growing and reaching out a little. And then it sent 1 finger across the petri dish towards the 3 glass discs. Now, it was not in contact with them. It doesn't have eyes, but it could feel there's something there, and there's more on that side than there is on the other, and it might be food, and it sent out this finger. And so how did it feel that? The soma, the body, feels everything. Everything influences everything. Everything in the universe in some way is registering in the body. And you spoke of indigenous cultures, and I think we have to go back to them to get a sense of what we have lost with our connection to that fundamental, it's our primary intelligence, the intelligence of the body. And there's a culture in the islands that trail off Alaska that separate the Bering Sea from the Pacific Ocean, the Aleut culture. And there is an elder in the Aleut culture who grew up in the indigenous way. And he's like a bridge between that way that we've lost and where we are today. And he was a kid. He speaks about, his name is Ilarion Merkuliev.
Yeah, I know. And we've had him on a number of our summits.
Oh,
He's
wonderful.
a good friend.
Oh, just my heart just sings at what he has to offer us. But then let me still recount the story.
Yeah,
as a kid, watching the hunters sitting on these basalt rocks at the edge of the sea, and their relationship with the sea lion was as sacred as the relationship the Plains Indians had with the buffalo. And they would sit there in silence, not daydreaming, not distracted, for hours and hours. And then one of them might say, sea lion coming, and all the heads would turn and look in the same direction to a sea lion that might be 5 or 10 miles offshore. Couldn't be seen, but it could be felt. And that happens over and over in indigenous cultures. They feel the presence of water. They feel medicines that plants have to offer. They feel animals moving through their world. And that attunement of the body, it's like an ocean of knowing next to the puddle that the brain and the head has access to.
I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, and I want to ask you in a moment about the 5 qualities of being that really underpin your approach that you call Embodied Present Process. But we are in a natural process of evolution, human evolution, planetary evolution, life evolution, what have you. And so we have developed these amazing brains. And part of the challenge, and I think it's part of the natural hero's journey, there's a separation like in a hero's journey. There's a fall, and then there's the whole process of reclaiming and coming home, right? And if we're able to come home and get in relationship again with the intelligence and the wisdom of the body and be embodied lives, then this supercomputer on our shoulders can now be in service of or in alignment with this somatic intelligence and somatic wisdom. And thus there is some possibility. The fact that we develop these, I think, greater capacities for self-awareness and perhaps the actual realization, although we might be in a less evolved life form, we might be in a more synchronous embodied state with consciousness, we would be so without a lot of self-awareness. So the possibility of again, becoming embodied consciousness with self-awareness, I think is maybe the reason we're here and the reason we're evolving. I'm wondering about your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So the way I see it is when we're centered in the belly, I feel the belly as the sort of female realm of being. I feel the head as the male realm of abstraction. And had we not made that journey to the head, we would not have Shakespeare, we would not have Rembrandt, we would not have Bach, we would not have the Taj Mahal. There are wonders that are facilitated by our capacity to gain perspective and analyze. As you say, the brain and the head developed to supplement the embodied intelligence, not to supplant it. And so I honestly believe our very survival as a species depends on reuniting, rebalancing our two poles of intelligence into a unity that welcomes them both. And I see such a deep accord between the work of Ian McGilchrist and mine, where he differentiates between right hemisphere and left hemisphere thinking. He's very clear. The left hemisphere, which is abstract and linear and manipulative, needs nothing from the right hemisphere as far as it's concerned. It has all the answers. Whereas the right hemisphere welcomes what the left hemisphere has to offer. And I really see that. The embodied intelligence in its accord with wholeness doesn't exclude the head. It includes it. Without that, there is no wholeness.
Yeah, it seems very much part of another way to look at the journey we're on as humanity is a re-embracing of the deep feminine for sure. And interesting, in the Eastern traditions, I think all the Vedic traditions, certainly in the Buddhist tradition, which I've been practicing for many years, we often talk about body, speech, and mind. And if you're doing prostrations or there's certain things you do, up here is body, speech, and then mind is always in the heart. So you have Sanskrit word like chitta, C-I-T-T-A, or in Japanese it's shin, and it means heart-mind. Yeah. And that's actually the name of our organization. There's this idea that the consciousness is more centered in the entire body, and the heart is one expression of it. I think you could also talk about it in the gut as well. But this is more like it is a supercomputer, but the seat of consciousness is actually here, and that's meant to serve this.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And the way I feel it is my center of being and my center of thinking is in the belly, and the heart is the portal through which my wholeness meets the wholeness of the world. And I think there's a danger in our culture. We recognize the importance of the heart, but we're trying to go from the head to the heart. And I think many people are, and I think when you do that, you leave the heart somewhat subservient to the head. And for me, the heart, if it's not expressing your being, what is it expressing? And if it's not connected to that center of being, how can it express it? So I feel almost as though there's this flower rooted in the loam of the pelvic bowl, and the stem of the flower rises up and the flower opens through the heart. And what passes through my being passes through my heart and comes into that communion with the world.
Yeah, that very much also aligns with the chakra system in the Vedic traditions as well. And yeah, I think so very much. And, that in all the martial arts, the center of our gravity, the center of our being, it's down here, the dantian, it's somewhere below the navel in the gut. And that really is even physically the center of our being, as well as I think it's really the center of our life force as well. Yeah, it seems like we're on a journey back to that. So I wonder if you could then talk about these 5 qualities of being that are foundational to your approach to the embodiment work that you do.
Absolutely. So the head puts doing before being. The imperative is getting this done and driving towards an outcome. And I think the balanced relationship is first being, then doing. So in coming back to being, I just think it helps to recognize what the characteristics of being are. And as you said, there are these 5 characteristics. Fluidity is one, that everything in the world is fluid. Mountains are waves that move very slowly, but they are fluid, more fluid than a river. But there's nothing that is not fluid. Physicists try to bring matter down to absolute zero where everything stops, and they can't. There is always movement. And we are 65, 70% water. There is that ocean within us. And if we are to come back to being, it's not a matter of achieving fluidity or striving for it. It's there. So the issue is, how can you safely surrender to your own nature, to your own fluidity? The second quality is groundedness. So all of our lives, we've been at rest on the earth. But I think most people, it may have been years since they truly felt at rest on the earth. That is our primary relationship with the earth itself. And when you come to rest on the earth, you partake of an intelligence, a field, a strength that does not belong to you. It is something in which you partake. And again, it's not something to strive for or achieve. It's there. You are at rest on the earth. How to surrender to your reality. The third quality is spaciousness. There is more spaciousness than matter. I read recently that you could have a piece of lead that was 97,000 light years long, and you could send a neutrino through it and it would not hit any matter. We are mostly empty space, and it's in our spaciousness that our deepest potential lies. But what happens is we become congested. Our bodies become weighted and filled with anxieties and doubts and ambitions, and how to recover spaciousness. And again, it's not an ideal to strive for. You're just coming back to your reality. The fourth is centeredness. Everything has a center, and nature generates itself through this dance of complementary opposites, which very often express themselves in a spiral. And every spiral has a center, and the earth has a center, and the solar system, and there's a black hole at the center of our galaxy, and we have a center. And we have displaced our center, moved it from the body up to the head, and then we wonder why we feel out of balance. And to come back to your center, again, it's not something to manufacture. It's there. Can you surrender to it? And the last of these qualities is attunement. And I feel the body as a resonator. I feel my body like a singing bowl that resonates to the world and feels it. And everything attunes to everything else. It's just the nature of our world. If you fill that singing bowl with sand, then there is no resonance. And that's what happens as the body becomes congested, and how to, again, surrender to the subtlety of what is felt through the body.
You also talk about the problem of self-consciousness and being stuck in this loop of self-consciousness. And many teachers have talked about that self-consciousness, which emerged as evolutionary as a human phenomena with our incredible brains, is both a blessing and a curse. But it's a curse when we get stuck in that loop. And so how do we get unstuck from that loop and into a more embodied consciousness, which makes use of our capacity for self-awareness and being conscious beings, but is not stuck in that internalized, almost incestuous self-consciousness loop?
That is such a great question. Self-consciousness is, for me, an inevitable consequence of feeling alone. And I don't think there's such a thing as aloneness, but if you feel alone, then your experience is strictly private. And then your number one job in life is to make that successful. And so what we do is we take the spotlight of our attention and we turn it off the world and onto ourselves, and we get busy organizing ourselves. And now the primary relationship in your life is between the divided parts of yourself, and you are in self-consciousness. The self is conscious of the self. And the challenge is to wean that relationship off that relationship, to find the humility and the courage and the trust to find the world more compelling, more rich than you find your own thoughts and your own self. And in that divided state, we live with this running commentary that you mentioned earlier, where we judge and doubt and goad and devise, and inner dialogue is only possible where there's inner division. And Ilarion speaks of true intelligence as a state where there are no thoughts going through your mind, where there is, and as he speaks of that, what I recognize is attunement, an attunement to the world that is so rich in information and so unreliant on language.
Mm. I'd like to come back for a moment to this, what you mentioned about self-regulation earlier. And I think I get your point, and this isn't to argue that at all, but just to unpack it a little further. It makes me think of being out in the woods, right? And I love walking in the woods. And when you're in the woods, and the woods will pull us into silence and pull us into presence. And unless we've really got our mind disturbed and cranked up, but most of the time it will pull us into presence, pull us into silence. And so now we're in relationship with the space, the environment we're in, and it's naturally pulling us into regulation. Our breath will change. Everything about our whole system will move into a natural kind of a well-regulated state, and we'll be co-regulating with the environment. In fact, the co-regulation is bringing us into self-regulation. And of course, our body and nervous system learns self-regulation or auto-regulation from the mother originally in that co-regulate space of co-regulation. But for many of us who find us in such dysregulated states and even stuck in patterns of dysregulation, so I personally teach in a lot of different settings. I'm a meditator and a meditation teacher. And one way to look at meditation, it can be to begin with a process of self-regulation. I also work a lot with correctional officers, as I mentioned before we got going, and they're so exposed to trauma and chronic stress, and they're so dysregulated, suffering so much. They're really, to begin with, just to learn to work with their breath a little bit, to be able to regulate their own autonomic nervous system, to bring up more parasympathetic activation and bring in. But anyway, that's a long kind of intro to the way I teach meditation. I teach a very deeply embodied approach to practice. And we know from current neuroscience that running commentary and that stuck in that loop of self-consciousness that creates that sense of separateness and all the suffering has to do with a very active default mode network, a particular network in the brain that's active when we don't direct our attention. And it has its purpose. If we can free it from the fear and anxiety, it's the source of all creativity. But when it's full of fear and anxiety, it's just stuck in that self-consciousness loop. And so one of the ways to, and rather than struggling with that directly, if we just focus our attention, that activates another neural network called the task positive network. And they have a mutually inhibitory relationship. You activate the task, the other one starts to go offline, the mind will quiet down naturally. And so for me, it begins with a process of coming into a relationship with the body and learning to feel again. So I teach people to feel the body, to begin with, even the surface of the skin, and then going in, activating interoceptive awareness and feeling. And the deeper we go, we get into this abiding activation of the task positive network. So the mind really quiets down, becomes very spacious. And now we're into this vast somatic universe of sensation, which goes, I think, almost all but limitless. Our entire body, all the way down to the bones, is a living organism, all sensory and all energy and all conscious. And so the deeper we go with that, we're dropping into beingness, right? And often what I finish and so along the way, though, we may start with a kind of intentional, self-directed, effortful self-regulation or mindfulness, but along the way, our nervous system and brain is learning, because it's getting a lot of data. There's like activation of this internal neurobiofeedback loop, and it's learning how to drop into attention stabilization, from there into deeper states of awareness, from there into beingness and flow. And those neural networks are already there, but they're becoming activated, becoming robust, such that we can find our way there easily and abide there. And we're moving from self-regulation then into auto-regulation, and from effortful mindfulness into effortless mindfulness, which is really important, because then dropping into the deeper states of flow requires relaxation. At some point, effort gets in the way, right? So and often I finish these practices, as we're any guided session, I just drop in and I've hopefully guided people into a felt sense of being, right? Beingness, but also the way there is to feel. And so often I finish off with just a quality of just being and feeling. feeling, and being, right? So it does begin with a process of self-regulation, but it's reclaiming our capacity for auto-regulation. Now, I think we can do the same out in nature, but many of us don't have ongoing access to nature. We can do the same in a relationship if we really drop down and drop into a state of connection and co-regulation with someone. But in order to have a way to train ourselves to have more access to those possibilities, that's where I feel the self-regulation practices can be a portal then into auto-regulation and back into relationship and to our body and consciousness in a capacity for both. So your thoughts on
So I'm completely on board with that. And it's just a semantic thing that's important to me. So let me speak to that. I think there are 3 stages to embodiment. And the first stage is to feel the body. It's absolutely necessary and a huge leap for many people. The second stage is to notice the orphans within it and to integrate them. And both of those stages are facilitated by listening to the body, which is a state of self-consciousness, the self being conscious of the self. And there's the value in self-consciousness. The third step of embodiment for me is that step whereby you shift your awareness from the self onto the world and attune to the present and find guidance there. Where I have this personal hesitation with using self-regulation as a term for those first 2 steps is because we've got a cultural belief that we can organize ourselves to success. And I think organization is the compulsion of our society. We want to organize everything. We want to organize nature. We want to organize our breath and make it right. We want to organize we organize everything. And when organization becomes an obsession, I think it is impossible to be present, because my experience of being present is an experience in which I feel myself being organized by the present. I'm being informed by it, carried by it, guided by it. And so I think of those first 2 steps, like allowing the breath to calm, as making the body more available to the present, coming back into relationship with the present, out of that driven inner commentary that obscures it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it is a question of semantics. But at any time we use the word self, it can be problematic. We're using it in the most ordinary sense here. And I think that's a conundrum with any practice. To do any kind of inner work, there is a requirement to organize ourselves a little bit to do that
Absolutely.
work. But at some point, if it's an impulsive drive to organize everything, that gets in the way. So there's always that conundrum. We have to let go, and ultimately the process is letting go and surrendering. Organizing ourselves to have the right causes and conditions to then be able to do that work, but hopefully keeping in mind and realizing that there's that organizing impulse is not just going to go away. We need to be aware of that and consciously relax out of that and let that go, because I think it actually will go away naturally at some point, because the deeper we are in the body, it becomes so compelling. There's a natural kind of surrender. And then the move outward is quite natural as well, because we're no longer caught in the self-consciousness loop, so we're completely available to the world. When we're finally fully embodied, we're completely available to the world. So I think it becomes a very organic and natural process.
I agree, because what the body most deeply feels is the present, and what the body most deeply understands is that it belongs. The body recognizes itself in a body of water, in a tree. And I think what the body most deeply recognizes is that everything is alive, that when you're fully embodied, you feel the life of everything around you.
Phillip, would you be so kind as to lead us in a brief practice? Maybe one of your 250 practices. maybe just something about 5 minutes or so, just something just for people in our audience that they could just begin that process of coming home and reclaiming or getting a relationship again with their embodied consciousness.
Yeah, I'd be absolutely delighted. There's a practice, spoke of the 5 qualities of being. There's a practice that hits 4 of them: fluidity and spaciousness and groundedness and attunement. And it's one of the foundational, there's sort of 4 foundational practices I've got. It's one of those. And your listeners could stand for this. If they're comfortable doing that, you can also do it sitting down. And take a moment to bring your awareness to the body. And at the end of the out breath, feel the body release to the in breath. And at the end of the in breath, feel the body release to the out breath. And you'll begin to feel a wave of release through the body. The breath wave can travel through the body, eventually to the soles of the feet, top of the head, to the fingertips, but just let it travel as freely as it's able to. And feel with each in-breath, with each out-breath, that release of the body to the breath. And then bring your awareness to the body's spaciousness and just gently notice where there is spaciousness within your being and where that spaciousness is a little closed off. And to recognize that wherever there are shadows in the body, wherever the spaciousness is compromised, there is an energy that is held there. And to feel those places without any judgment, to recognize them as you might look upon an orphan that is alone, to offer them your unconditional acceptance, to offer them your love, and to feel, to be present to those shadows in the body, in the same way that an orphan longs for someone to be fully present to them. And within those held energies in the body, you might find a secret pocket of anxiety that is held within the body. And if that's the case, locate it for yourself as specifically as you can. Feel it as clearly as you can. Feel its presence with unconditional acceptance, with an embrace of love. And you may feel in the background of your being a jitteriness in your cells, like a white noise or a static noise. And that's that driven quality of our culture living through your body. And it too takes up space in the body. And just as gently as you can, to feel that jitteriness in the background of your being. And to feel it without asking it in any way to be other than what it is. To be as fully present to it as you can. And you may feel as well a little tugging, as though it's saying, just being here is enough. The tugging that's pulling you towards your responsibilities and all there is to do and what you're worried about getting done. And that tugging that, like a fishhook, tugs us out of the present. And again, to feel that energy in the body, to feel how it too takes up space in the body, and to be present to it with love as fully as you can, to locate it as specifically as you can. And bring your awareness to the energy of the legs, and to feel the legs are like antennae that connect us to the earth and pick up so much intelligence, and they too are hampered by held energies, and to feel those shadows in the legs as clearly as you can, to locate them and be present to them. And bring your awareness to the energy of your thoughts. So not to the thoughts themselves, but behind those thoughts is the energy driving them. It's a little like peeking behind the curtain to discover the Wizard of Oz. And to locate that driving energy and to understand that it is trying to keep you safe, and to give it your gratitude and your unconditional acceptance. And then open your awareness on the whole of the body's energy as you might open your eyes on a star field at night, and feel it in all its diversity and all its specificity within your being. And then, as gently as you can, give that energy permission to begin to melt. And you feel that energy phase shift within your body. It just gently releases and begins to trickle down through the body like water through pebbles. And you feel this descending cascade down through the body, down through the hips, down through the legs. And the first little trickle arrives on the soles of your feet. And as that cascade continues to descend, it pools there, and those pools begin to grow. They rise inside the legs like a tide. And still you're noticing any shadows in the body, anywhere the spaciousness is incomplete. And wherever that is, you feel it with as much presence as you can. You give it your love. You feel it gently melt under the warmth of that love, and you feel it descending through the body, dropping down, down to join that fluid energy rising in the legs. And it rises and rises eventually to the pelvic floor. And still you notice at a subtler level the little holdouts, the little patterns of tension or shadow in the body. And just to gently feel those and to give them your love and to feel them relax under the warmth of that love and melt and descend through the body. And that fluid energy in response rises up eventually to the top of the pelvic bowl. And as the last few trickles descend, just take a moment to notice how much space there is above the pelvic bowl, with room enough in your being for all the world to be felt. And then bring your awareness to that fluid energy in the legs and the pelvic bowl, and discover for yourself how to let that energy come completely to rest. You let that energy settle. You let it settle more deeply still. And as it drops, you feel the weight of that energy come to rest on the soles of your feet. And you let it settle more deeply still. And it deepens into rest. And you feel that energy join the earth. And allow it to come just a little bit more deeply to rest. And you feel yourself join the present. And in that state of grounded sensitivity, where the spaciousness above the pelvic bowl sensitizes us to the world, and that groundedness in the legs and the pelvic bowl gives us the stability to feel everything without needing to resist it. Allow yourself just for a moment to notice how the body naturally attunes to the world. And notice how the groundedness supports that spacious sensitivity. And notice how that sensitivity offers so much to the groundedness in the way of attunement and information. And notice too, perhaps, how the body's energy has a coherence, not just within itself, but with the energy of the world around you. And that brings the practice to a close.
Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much. That was exquisite, delicious, blissful, absolutely wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to share that.
Oh, thank you so much, Phil. This has been an illuminating interview. And you mentioned the word coherence there. It's my understanding of this work, all the different elements within our body and all the glands, the organs, they all emit various energy and wave frequencies. And of course, we have our different brainwave states, our heartbeat at different frequencies, the rhythm of our breath at different frequencies. And the more we relax into deep embodiment, all this begins to cohere or map onto each other, which gives us this palpable experience of flow, of beingness. And that seems to be a beacon we can follow when we begin to feel that energy flow in the body, that harmonic kind of flow, that sort of just attuning with that begins to really bring us home. And then you so beautifully connected us with the earth in the process of that. So.
I think what athletes speak of as being in the zone is exactly that experience. And if I'm asked to define embodiment, my definition is that embodiment is a state in which the whole of your intelligence comes into coherence with the present.
Beautiful. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Phillip, for this. And thank you for your work. And it's been really a joy to do this interview with you. And thank you for being part of our summit.
It's been such a joy being with you, Philippe. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Be well.
You too.